Hi, I'm Cherna Gitnick. I was born December 14th, 1941 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Lived in Milwaukee my first 5 years, and that is where my older brother Philip Schrager was born as well. Have many relatives in Milwaukee, but when I was 5, my dad decided that it was time to move to Omaha. So there we went to Omaha and moved to a duplex, 318 North 48th Street. I then attended Dundee Elementary School for the first 8 years there, and found it very pleasant. Walked to school back and forth every day.
Cherna, tell me a little bit about some of your friends while you were going to school.
A lot of Omaha friends. Steve Block, Judy Plattner, Tony Kaplan, Joy Frieden, Carolyn Stern, Barbara Greenberg. The list can go on and on. And we had a lot of fun growing up and going to school at Dundee. Then my younger brother was born in Omaha, Harley, 5 years after I was born. And let's see, after Dundee, I attended Central High School and graduated from Central in 1959. During that time, I had a lot of fun. My biggest hobby, I guess you would say, was riding horses. And I did that for, I'll say a good 10 years. Then at around 16 years of age, I traded in my horses for a Chevrolet convertible. I was 16 then, and probably a junior in high school, and graduated from Central High, as I told you, and went on to the University of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida for 2 years. Then came back to Omaha and finished my college education at the University of Omaha, or UNO.
I'm Gary Gitnick. I was born March 13th, 1939 in Omaha. My brother Jerry was born 7 years before me. To this day, he remains 7 years older than me. The family lived at 2043 North 20th Street, which is near 20th and Burdett. I went to Lake School initially. Then when I was about 9 or 10, we moved to 30th and Pinckney, across from our grocery store, and I then attended Druid Hill School for a couple of years. I skipped a couple of grades and went to Central High School, starting at a young age. And from Central, I then went to the University of Chicago, where I did my college and medical school. And from the University of Chicago, I went to Johns Hopkins for internship, then to the Mayo Clinic for my medical training. Then I went to the National Institutes of Health, where I worked on vaccine development and got interested in science and research. Then went back to the Mayo Clinic and did my subspecialty training in gastroenterology. And in 1969, Cherna and I moved here to Los Angeles. The family that I grew up with was small. Aside from my mother and father and my grandmother and my brother. There was my cousin Gail Trediak, who's now Gail Cole, and her parents Selma and Iz Trediak. But aside from them in Omaha, we didn't have any other relatives. We had relatives in Kansas City. That was Gus and Ann Agrin and their children Sharon and Gary. And we had relatives in St. Louis. And that was my uncle Itzy Gitnick, his two children and wife.
I want to hear about your parents, Cherna.
My mother was a full-time wife and mother, and my dad and his partner Irving Herzog established a central construction company in Omaha, where they remained in the business for about 40 years. Shortly after we moved to Omaha, 2 or 3 years later, we moved to our permanent home, which was on Fair Acres Road, and pretty much grew up on Fair Acres Road, and of course went to Central High School. My girlfriends and friends pretty much remained the same. A few more added on along the way as we all went to Central High and joined Rohanu BBG Girls Club while in high school.
Were you involved in any activities in high school?
No, I was pretty much riding horses then, riding and showing horses. And by 16, you're pretty well established. I can't remember. Oh, I know. I was part of the a cappella choir at Central High School, and we did a citywide concert, I believe, citywide high school concert, and probably did a little bit of stage, a little bit maybe 1 year. I was pretty well involved with my horses and my friends and my 1957 Chevrolet convertible. That was the highlight of my life before I went on to college.
Where did you and Gary meet?
Well, that's a funny story. At the time, well, in Omaha, one of my very dear friends, Gail Trediak, and I were girlfriends, and she got engaged and invited me to her wedding. And while at the wedding, I went up to the bar to get my parents some drinks. And when I went up there, I met two young fellas. One was Gary, and another one I don't remember his name anymore, but that's how we met. I picked him up at the bar.
That's not the more of that story is that my Aunt Selma had seated me at a table with a table for 8 with 7 single Jewish girls, and I was so embarrassed. This is true. I was so embarrassed that I just got up and I spent the night at the bar. And was just waiting there, and Cherna came up, and that's.
Was it love at first sight?
Like at first sight, very much like, I think. And we started dating a little bit, and then he went back to the University of Chicago to finish his medical school education, and would come back to Omaha, and we would date some more. And then he went off to Johns Hopkins. I started teaching school in Omaha after graduation, and stayed in Omaha and went up to visit him at Johns Hopkins. That pretty well took care of that. That was pretty solid, and fell in love and got engaged Thanksgiving 1963, and got married June 21st, 1964.
We we actually had only 12 dates before we got married. It was only,
Very
but
few.
it was only it was but it was
Long distance.
spread over 18 months. And to show you how sharp I was at the time, we got engaged on Thanksgiving, but I took Cherna to Gordon's, a fish restaurant, and
Baltimore.
on Thanksgiving Day, a seafood restaurant, and the restaurant was empty. Empty except for the waiters and Cherna and me. And so I gave her the ring, and she had no one to show the ring to except the maitre d'.
Was sitting in a little box on the table, and I said, "Uh-oh." And I opened it up, and I said to the waiter, "Look, I'm engaged."
But you
Call the
remember,
folks.
we went up to Washington?
Yes,
I-
yes.
We,
You took me on a lovely tour.
nothing but the best. I took Cherna on a Greyhound bus. Could have gone on a cheaper bus. We went on a Greyhound. And we took an hour trip to Washington, and just shortly after the bus started moving, I fell asleep.
That's right.
And I slept the whole way.
That's right. I said, "Uh-oh."
This was during my internship, and I had a very rough, intense internship. We just got no sleep at all. And as soon as I was able to sit down, I would generally go to sleep.
Gary, tell me a little bit about some of your experiences in going to University of Chicago and then to medical school there.
Well, I went to college and medical school on scholarship. I got scholarships to several good medical schools, but the only one that gave me a complete package was the University of Chicago. So that's where I ended up, and the University of Chicago in those years was unique in that you weren't required to go to classes, and you weren't required to take tests. All you were required to do is at the end of the year take a comprehensive exam covering whatever subject it was, English, history, chemistry, whatever. The exam would last at least a day, sometimes a day and a half, and that was your whole grade. So it was, you did have tests that you could take, but they were elective, and you did have classes that you go to, but no one took attendance, and you were taught by just remarkable, charismatic people. You could walk anywhere and sit down on a park bench on campus and talk to a Nobel laureate. You could. Everyone was welcome. For example, the president of the university had won a Nobel Prize. His name was George Beadle. And every morning he would, at 7 a.m., he would sit down at a long table in the medical school cafeteria. And anyone in the college or any of the graduate schools could come and sit down at that table without appointment. Just sit down and talk to him about anything they wanted to talk about, which is just a remarkable kind of atmosphere. And it was true all over campus. You could just go anywhere and talk to anybody. It was a very liberal campus. Many people in that conservative time felt it was too liberal. I remember we would have folk singers like Pete Seeger and Odetta come to campus, and they were considered communists at the time. And you'd go to these outdoor concerts, and you'd see FBI agents walking around taking down the license numbers of every car parked around the area. But the atmosphere in the 60s was a very, very conservative, rightist atmosphere. I did a different thing. I really wanted to get out of school, although I got good grades. I never liked school. I worked very hard. Nothing ever came easy for me, and also it was expensive. And so I was in the first class in which you were able to go to college and medical school in 7 years. You got both degrees at the end of 7 years, which subsequently other universities have done, and we do it now frequently. At that time, I was strongly advised not to do it. And as a matter of fact, I learned a rule while I was at the University of Chicago that I've kept all my life. You never listen to advisors, and I never have. Had I listened to my advisors at any time during my career, I wouldn't be where I am now, and I wouldn't have. I don't know where I'd be, but I don't think I'd be better off. I didn't follow the advice of my advisors. I went for the 7-year program and went to medical school at the University of Chicago, again on scholarship. While there, both in college and medical school, I held down at least 2 jobs at a time. So I would go to school, then I'd go to one job, then I'd go to another job, then I'd study, then I'd sleep for a short time, then I'd get up and start it all over again. But it was necessary at that time to do things that way. And that was also true in medical school, which was, it probably would have been better if I didn't have to work, because there were ups and downs in my grades in medical school because of that. Cherna mentioned earlier that one of my jobs in medical school was to work in the morgue, where I was a deaner's assistant, which is you're an assistant at autopsies, which I really didn't enjoy, but it was good money because nobody else really wanted to do that kind of work. And then I also, the funny thing is, another job I had after school, another job, I don't know what you were referring to, another job I had was, I worked in the Department of Pathology, and I took photomicrographs of tissues that were cut on slides. And all of a sudden, my photomicrographs, they kept on complaining about them because they came out blurry. Well, and that happened for a long time, and I almost lost my job. And it turned out that my vision was going bad during that year, and I needed glasses, and I didn't realize it. But we tried to figure out why I was taking such lousy pictures. And then when I got my glasses, then I was able to retain the job. I think Cherna referred to a job I had earlier. During the summers when I would come home from college.
I didn't know him then, so it's a good thing.
Yeah, right. See, all through my life, from 7 years on, I always have been employed pretty much continuously. But during whether I was in high school or during the summers coming home from college, I would work in our family grocery store, which was a small little grocery store, which to me looked huge, but was really a tiny little place. And the store was open from 7 a.m. till 9 p.m. And it was also open on Sundays, and Saturdays we worked stocking shelves. But my brother and I pretty well ran the store, and then when my brother went to college, I ran the store. But in college, when I would come home, I would work in the store, but I'd also had a job working at County Hospital in the locked mental ward, which was a real experience. Mm-hmm. The first day I went to work there, the head nurse sat me and another guy down who was my partner, and they said, your main job here, whatever you think job you've taken, your main job here is to protect the nurses. Because there were violent people. This was a really locked ward with people in straitjackets, and they did terrible things in those times, which soured me on a lot of what was going on in medicine. They did insulin shock and they did electric shock, and to me these were horrible things that they were doing. But at that time, they thought these were the ways to treat people with mental illness. And I I worked in that mental ward every summer during college when I would come home to Omaha. Now, getting back to college and medical school, it's hard to remember all of the experiences. I remember, for example, in college, freshman chemistry, and I was amazed that the man who taught me freshman chemistry a year earlier won a Nobel Prize. Gee, isn't, just wonderful that a freshman college student would be taught by a Nobel laureate. No Nobel laureate would want to do that. And the University of Chicago really made you appreciate a love of learning. I went there pretty raw and not really enjoying academics. And I never really enjoyed working for grades. But I did love creative writing, and I loved history, and I didn't, believe it or not, didn't like any of the sciences. I certainly didn't like biology, but I wanted to be a doctor. That's a dichotomy, but I never liked any of the sciences. I never enjoyed them, but I wanted to be a doctor.
Why did you want to be a doctor? Was there a reason that moved you
Well,
toward medicine?
You never know why you want to do something. Originally I was going to be a rabbi. When I grew up, I was, as a youngster, I was very religious. I used to walk from 20th and Burdett all the way down to almost to downtown to the synagogue we went to. It was the Orthodox synagogue, and it was near Cummings. I would, every Friday and every Saturday, I'd walk there, I'd walk home, regardless of the weather. And I was really very devout, very religious. I went to Hebrew school, and there was no doubt that I wanted to be a rabbi. And my grandmother, Allah Shalom, clearly wanted me to be a rabbi. And one of the most difficult things is when I was a junior going to be a senior in high school, I applied for rabbinical school, and actually I think my Hebrews teacher, Mr. Wilson, applied for me. I don't think I actually applied. And I remember him coming and saying, "You've got a scholarship, you go to Columbia half day for college, and the other half day you go to the yeshiva, and you'll come out and you'll be an ordained rabbi, and you'll have your undergraduate degree as well." And that was all set, and I was going. And then in my senior year, I just decided I didn't want to be a rabbi. It was a very hard thing to do because my grandmother felt so strongly about how wonderful it was that her grandson was going to be a rabbi. I think my parents were relieved. But, in high school, I was a debater. And I went into debate because I was fearful of public speaking. I was always afraid to get up and talk in class or anywhere, so I decided we got to get over this. So I went into debate, and Gene Cohn was my debate partner, and we did really well, and we became we became Omaha champions, then state champions, regional champions. And it got me out of Omaha, and it was the only chance I ever really had to see the rest of the country. But through debate, we were able to travel all over the nation, and Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, Gene and I would be traveling to different debate tournaments. And it was a real eye-opener to see that there were other things going on around the country. And so I think it was because of debate that I decided not to be a rabbi, but to be a lawyer. But that didn't last very long. First of all, my brother had already decided that he was going to be a lawyer. I didn't think it would be good to have two lawyers in the family. And then I decided I really didn't like the idea of law. I just didn't like that kind of work, and I'd always had some interest in medicine. At night, once I decided to go to become a doctor, I spent my late evenings after we closed the store. We closed the store at 9 o'clock at night, and then I had like a workshop in the basement of our house. And at that time, I had decided I was going to be a neurologist or a neurosurgeon. I don't know why I decided that. And so I started building a brain. And I'd made models of human brains in the basement of our house on 30th Street. And
material.
I used wood and a putty, and I carved. I carved different parts of the brain, and then I'd hook them together. Through my career, I decided to be almost every specialty in medicine. There was a time when I was going to be a psychiatrist, a time when I was going to be a pediatrician. Almost everything I learned about medicine, I decided that was I was going to do. And in fact, through most of medical school, it was clear to me that I was going to be a surgeon. To the extent that you were able, when you were a junior and senior at the University of Chicago, to work at what was called a sub-intern, which was a medical student who really functioned as an intern. You reported to the resident, you didn't report to another intern, and you really functioned as an intern. So I did 2 consecutive sub-internships on a surgical service. And I was clearly headed to surgery, and then I started getting interested in other kinds of medicine, especially gastroenterology, which is where I ended up. I just wanted to go into something that was relatively new, and the field had just, this is a young subspecialty. The field had only become a subspecialty in the late 50s. And I was just fascinated by how you decided what caused pain in the abdomen. What was the cause of abdominal pain? Because there are so many different things that could cause it, and it just fascinated me to figure out what was going on. It also, the organs at that time, we didn't know what the liver did. We had very little idea of how it functioned. And very little research had been done in gastroenterology, so I figured I'd be getting in on the ground floor of a new field. And I decided then to become a gastroenterologist and not to go into surgery. And the surgeon who I had sub-interned for, and I had become very close, and he was a world-renowned surgeon. His name was George Block. And when I decided not to go into surgery, he just absolutely exploded. He had a very short fuse anyway. And I'll tell you a story about George Block. He was a character, and he'd come in, give a lecture at 7:30 in the morning, and every morning he'd go to George Block's lecture on general surgery. And one of the residents, and he always had a resident who would give him a glass of water, have it sitting at the podium. The resident's job was to put a glass of water there. Well, one day the resident decided to put a glass of vodka there. So he puts a glass of vodka on the podium, and George comes in, starts his lecture, picks up a glass of water, chugs the whole thing down, continues with the lecture as if nothing had happened.
Was everybody in the audience
Anyway,
laughing immediately?
everybody was. I mean, people didn't know what to do. They didn't know whether to laugh or not to laugh.
And what was his reaction? when
Nothing.
he was-
I mean, George knew very
Just
well
kept
what was going on.
going.
He was telling, he was giving everybody a message. Anyway, he exploded. He called me in and told me what a terrible mistake I was making, how devastating it was to him personally, and how I was going to ruin my life by not going into surgery. And he was angry at me for years afterwards, because I would run into him at meetings and things. But we finally mended the fences. But the other and we had, I must say, we were blessed. We had some really charismatic teachers in medical school. In remembering them, we just don't have teachers like that anymore. But I must say that a lot of it has carried over to my work at UCLA, where I really have tried to bring some of that atmosphere that I grew up under to the division that I run at UCLA now. Off the top of my head, I can't remember anything else that was of special interest in medical school, except, of course, meeting Cherna and getting engaged. And
Now, at what level of medical school or your residency did you come into the play?
Oh, I came at the best part, the end. I met him his last year of medical school, but I remained in Omaha and taught school while he did his internship at Johns Hopkins. Then we got married after the internship at the very end, and then we moved to Rochester, Minnesota, where I continued to teach school, and he did Mayo Clinic. Then we went to Bethesda, Maryland, which was very exciting. It was probably the determining factor in our married life about the kind of culture we wanted, a bigger city instead of smaller. The weather was a little bit milder in the wintertime than Omaha. We liked that too. But most of all, our firstborn was born at the Bethesda Navy Hospital. From there, we went back to Rochester, 25 below zero the day we moved back, and it was wonderful training for him, of course. For me, I could hardly wait till it was over because it was so cold. It was so cold.
And how was your life then? Were you together very much or very little?
He was busy. I was home, had another child, Kimberly, born at the Mayo Clinic. So I was busy with the children.
Yeah, I mean,
I together every night.
We were together, but late every
and
night.
weekends.
But Cherna raised the children. I really wasn't home. The kids, all of them came out wonderfully, but it really was because of Cherna. Cherna really raised the kids. She didn't see much of me. The kids didn't see much of me until we moved out here, and then we had a rule that I would spend Sundays we would spare Cherna. She had the day off, and I would be with the kids.
How did we get out here, you may be wondering? We were all set to move back to Omaha after he was done at the Mayo Clinic. It was all set he would have a practice with another doctor, and but then while we were at the Mayo Clinic those last 2.5 years, it was so bitter cold, and met a couple. He had a medical license in California, and asked him how he got it, being he was at the Mayo Clinic, and he said, well, I wrote a check for $25, and there's a reciprocity between California and Minnesota, and I got it. Oh, how interesting. Very nice. So I said to Gary, Gary, what do you say we look at California? This is our last chance. And if you don't like it out there, of course, Omaha is where we will be. And so I, being 7 months pregnant with our second child, went with Gary out here to look. I fell in love, of course, with California, palm trees swaying and the warm breezes and everything. How can you not like it? And Gary had appointments for interviews at UCLA, Scripps in San Diego, and with the head of the American Medical Association in San Francisco, who wanted Gary to come in and be a partner with him. And just looked and talked, and Gary said, "This is for me." "Are you sure?" "Oh yeah." So he picked UCLA, went right in 1969 as the associate professor, am I right?
I came in as assistant professor.
Sorry, assistant professor. And we brought two of our children with us, of course. We came with the car, our clothing, some furniture, came out not knowing anybody out here, no one. It was really quite a step. And lo and behold, as they say, we established ourselves and had two more children here in Los Angeles, Jill and Tracy.
But the real flavor of this is that I really did not want to come here. I did not want to move to California. Cherna was very insistent that she
Just to look.
Yeah,
Just
and
to look.
I really didn't want to do it. My whole plan had been to go back to Omaha, where I
Yes.
had everything set up. I had made arrangements before I went to Mayo. I had already started making arrangements to come back to Omaha, and that was the plan. And then,
of course, both families were
Right.
absolutely delighted that soon we would be coming home.
yeah, but then the second plan was if we weren't going to go to Omaha, I wanted to stay at Mayo because I was happy there. I really loved the gentlemanly but efficient practice of medicine
It's wonderful.
at a pretty high level in
For
those
him.
days. I think the quality of medicine then was much different than it is now. Mayo has become more of a cafeteria kind of medicine, but in those days it was really high quality, and I really loved it. And I didn't like the weather, but I wasn't outdoors that much. I was working most of the time, and Cherna detested every day that we were there.
It's cold.
Tell him about
And,
Bill Summerskill and you.
Was, to me, Mayo was just wonderful for him, but a small community, mostly physicians and their wives, were very nice, but I guess I wanted more. I wanted friends more outside of the medical field, and besides that, it was too cold for me. Didn't like it. So one night we went to his chairman of his department, Dr. Bill Summerskill, a very stately, wonderful English gentleman, world-renowned gastroenterologist, invited us to his home and for dinner, and tried to convince me to stay at the Mayo Clinic. Gary's a wonderful doctor. He'll take over. We'll help you get a house at 3% interest, you know, and no problem. And your children are guaranteed a college education. And now, Mrs. Gitnick, wouldn't you like to stay here? I said, Dr. Summerskill, that's a wonderful, wonderful offer, but if Gary wishes to stay, he may. But as for me, I'm out of here. Ooh. I couldn't believe that came out of my mouth, but it did.
I couldn't either. 'Cause the way she said it was, you didn't talk to department chairs that way in those days.
I wasn't going to stay.
Uh,
No way.
but
No way.
the other thing is that when
The other thing is, when we went to California to look, he fell in love with Los Angeles back then, with the palm trees and the homes with the swimming pools. He loved it. He loved it.
But I was concerned about the ostentation, and we had no resources. I mean, we moved out here with 2 kids.
Our first purchase was a refrigerator.
See, I'd always refused to take money from anybody in the family. We never took, so we came out here, and we spent our last dollar on a refrigerator, and that was in the middle of the month. So we went the last 2 weeks of our first month here. We had no cash at all. We were totally broke, waiting for my next check. Yeah.
Not that bad, but we were waiting for his first paycheck, you know, and slowly we adapted the freeways. They were quite different then than they are now, but still, and we move from home to home. But I would say, all in all, bottom line, it's been quite a ride. Thrilling, adventurous. Gary has kept us busy and very well in love with California, and wonderful family that we have. It's been a wonderful life.
But
No regrets.
I think that we were both concerned about what we'd heard about California.
The families, what did they say?
Well, they all thought we were crazy.
Well, not my folks, so they said, okay, honey, go out to California, we'll be there soon.
Well, it was
And within 5 or 10 years, they had moved out
still.
to Palm
It
Springs.
was a shanda that you would not go back to Omaha, because in those days, most people came back to Omaha, or most people didn't leave Omaha, and it was not the right thing to do. Then we got out here, and you heard all the stories about how bad California is, and how and the opulence and the ostentation and the falseness, and we didn't see that. I mean, we moved out here.
Kids went to school.
And it was,
Public school.
our neighborhood was like a small town, but I was concerned about it. And Cherna and I, as you may know, founded a nonprofit for disadvantaged
Along the
kids
road of life.
called the Fulfillment Fund. And one reason we did that was because we wanted to be sure our kids saw that there was another side of life, that there were a lot of people who were very poor out there who didn't have opportunity,
Especially
and
the young
weren't
people.
growing up with all of the benefits that you see in California. But anyway, that has also become a big part of our life since then.
Well, when you settled in at UCLA, what were you doing?
They created a job for me. Bill Summerskill, who we just talked about, had written a letter to the heads of gastroenterology at every California medical school. So we really started in San Diego and went all the way up to San Francisco and visited every place. And I got, but at UCLA, where I decided I wanted to go, they didn't have a job. And so they manufactured one, which was really very good. I think I fooled them. I think they thought they were getting some really hot guy, because while I was at NIH, I had published a lot. And it was only because I was in a very active laboratory, and I had some really smart people working for me, and I was there at the right time. So I came to UCLA with a long curriculum vitae already, which was very unusual in those days. And at any rate, they created a job as assistant director of the Clinical Research Center, which is called the CRC. And I got here, and I was in that job for a month, and they lost the grant. There was no, there was no CRC. But I was here, and so I got a job because I had a background in infectious disease. I worked on making vaccines when I was at NIH. I got a job, joint appointment in infectious diseases and in gastroenterology, and they just had to pull things together in order to actually create the position. And I tried to work in both fields for the first year or so. Then things opened up in gastroenterology, and I became a full-fledged gastroenterologist at UCLA. At that time, there were only 3 people who were gastroenterologists, one of whom was our dean, and I was the 4th. And since then, we've become the largest division in the world. Since then, I'm chief of the division now. But at that time, they were just kind of figuring a way to get me in, and things happened after that. I was fortunate in that I developed a very high-profile practice and at the same time had a very active research laboratory, and we've been very comfortable ever since.
Cherna, I want to hear about your children.
The gems in our life. Neil Douglas Gitnick, our firstborn. He is now 38. He has a lovely wife, Anita, and two darling boys. Thomas is now 7 and Charles is 3.5. Neil is really successful in a mortgage company. He owns his own company and very busy and very successful at what he's doing. Kimberly is 36, Kimberly Dale, and she has a beautiful son named River, and they live in Pacifica, which is a suburb of San Francisco. Neil lives in Woodland Hills. Jill, our third child, is now 34, and she and her husband Seth have 2 beautiful daughters. Sydney is almost 4, not quite, and Danielle, we call her Danny, she's 8 months old, and they live in Mill Valley, which is also a suburb of San Francisco. And our last but not least, Tracy, the youngest, is lives right here in Studio City, married to Stuart Harriet, and have a lovely home. She is the what should we say? She's head of the photographers at the Associated Press. I forgot to tell you, I'm sorry. Kimberly is has a master's degree in special education and teaches first grade at a private school called Nueva School in Hillsborough. And Jill is works for Ubisoft, and she's a chairman, or what would you say?
Jill's career is skyrocketed. She's an executive at Ubisoft.
Yeah, and her husband Seth is a lawyer with Lucasfilm Corporation, and very proud of all of them, very busy, and we have 5 grandchildren, and certainly hope to have more, which I know we will.
Do you get together often with the children?
Yes, we certainly do. We are very fortunate. Christmas time, we took them all to Hawaii for 10 days. They have been here, of course, for Thanksgiving, for Passover, and then this summer we're going to take all of them to San Diego at a beach resort on the beach to meet up for the first time with Gary's brother Jerry and his wife Sarah Ann and their 2 daughters and husbands and their 4 grandchildren. The cousins have never met one another, and this will be the first family reunion on Gary's side with his brother in San Diego, which we're really looking forward to. This should be a lot of fun.
Gary, tell me a little more about this foundation you have.
Well, we both have. And Cherna and I set up the Fulfillment Fund. We incorporated in 1977. We really started in 1973. And we now work every year with about 3,000 children in Los Angeles. We provide a program of mentoring, a 5-year mentoring program, either one-on-one mentoring, or we adopt the whole classroom in the most underperforming schools in Los Angeles. We provide a variety of college access programs, college counseling, career counseling, a variety of social services, tutoring, college site visits, a whole array of college access programs, plus scholarships. We ask that after college they come back and mentor 3 kids for 5 years as a payback, and it's become the largest community-based mentoring program in the United States. We just have a remarkable staff. We have 60 full-time staff, and they're all overworked, underpaid, but are wonderful people, do a remarkable job. The outcomes of the program are the best in the nation right now. We work in schools where less than 35% of students will graduate from high school. But if they're in our classrooms or our programs, the high school graduation rate is over 70%, and of those who graduate, 90% go on to college. Well, so the Fulfillment Fund now is on a course to move across the country. We have a group that's in its beginning its 5th year in San Francisco, and they're doing a really good job. And we have boards forming in Honolulu and in New York. And we hope one day there'll be a Fulfillment Fund in Omaha. Cherna, you'll have to hear from Cherna. She created the Friends of the Fulfillment Fund, which is an important support group. We're now spending over $7 million a year in the program here in Los Angeles. And as I say, the outcomes are really remarkable. The students we work with, we target C and D students. We don't target A and B students because our belief is that you can't do everything that has to be done, and the kids in the middle are lost, that there aren't as many opportunities for the kids who are right in the middle and are underperforming.
How many kids did you graduate so far?
So
do you know?
we don't know. We've thousands, but the
Full scholarships.
the kids, although they come in from backgrounds of violence and poverty, broken homes, and everything bad in society, they come from terrible backgrounds, and there's a common thread of poverty among the kids in the Fulfillment Fund. By the time they're in 12th grade, they have been mentored, tutored, counseled. They have visited 3 college campuses every year for 5 years, so that they've lived, on many college campuses. These kids who come in from backgrounds of violence and poverty, by the time they're in 12th grade, they're highly competitive with private school kids. So that to the extent now that every year we have over 100 colleges from around the United States visit our offices to interview our kids because they're in demand, and virtually, close to 100% of our kids get full college packages from the schools, no longer from us. We provide a small amount of scholarship money for travel and for books, but we insist that if one of our kids gets a college scholarship, that they get a full package, to the extent that we have an advocacy office where if one of our students gets a scholarship but it's inadequate, we will call that college and negotiate a better package. For example, just a short time ago this year, one of our girls from a terrible background, everything bad in life, just comes from extreme poverty, violence, drugs, everything you can think of. By the time she's in 12th grade, she gets a scholarship from Stanford, Harvard, and Duke. Now, Stanford and Duke give her complete packages. Housing, food, travel, tuition. Harvard just gives her a tuition scholarship. Our office then, our advocate then calls the Harvard admissions office, tells them that they really should have this girl because she really will enhance their campus and she belongs there, and we think she belongs there. But if they don't give her a full package, she's going to go to Stanford. And they gave her a full package. And I can tell you about some of our other kids, the typical examples of the children we work with. A young man moves to Los Angeles from Central America when he's about 8 years old, learns English as a second language, has a violent father, alcoholic, and a mother who is a drug user. Tremendous violence in the family. He cannot be in the same room with his father because of the intrafamilial violence, so he starts living on the streets. He joins a gang, becomes a local gangster. He eventually becomes a gang leader. He starts out at age 10 as a middleman. Well, actually, he starts out with the assignment of you want a 1999 Porsche radio. He goes out and finds a 1999 Porsche and he steals the radio. And then he brings it back, and the closer then sells the radio the next day to whoever ordered it. And then he becomes a car thief, and then he becomes a gang leader. And his high school counselor used to say about him, it's not that he so much dropped out of high school, he would drop in. Occasionally he'd come by. But he knew there was a spark in this kid, that this kid had brains, even though he clearly was non-performing. And actually, to survive on the streets of Los Angeles when you are in that kind of a situation, you do have to have brains. You have to have street smarts. And most kids in that situation don't expect to live beyond their 20s anyway. So the counselor brings this kid into the fulfillment, somehow convinces him that he should become part of the fulfillment fund. He gets a superb mentor team, husband and wife mentor team, who virtually turn him around. So that by the time he is in 12th grade, this boy has left the gang. He's president of his senior class. He's captain of the football team. He then goes to USC on scholarship, then goes to the Anderson School of Management at UCLA, gets his MBA, goes out and forms his own business, which is a business which sells fire alarms, burglar alarms, all kinds of things, and becomes a taxpayer. This kid comes from being a gangster into being a taxpayer, and it's purely because of the mentors that he had and the support services he had.